I just didn't understand that perfectly.
Okay. All right. So,
Just be mindful that you have about 12 minutes.
okay. So, the federal government in '68 started this farm at the University of Mississippi to provide for researchers. It went almost entirely to researchers who wanted to show what's bad with marijuana. If you wanted to show what's good with it, it was very difficult to get. So in the 90s, we had a marijuana for age wasting study approved by the FDA, approved by IRBs, but they wouldn't sell us the marijuana. We had a marijuana study for migraines, talked about headaches, with Ethan Russo, and again, we wouldn't get the marijuana. So they used their monopoly to block research into benefits, but it fundamentally blocks marijuana from ever becoming a medicine. So the phase 3 studies, which are the definitive pivotal studies that we're starting with MDMA, we're having a kilogram and a half of MDMA manufactured right now in England and encapsulated in the U.S., costing us over $1 million. Which, of course, you could get MDMA a lot cheaper, and it would be just as pure. It's just we have to do it under certain circumstances. But you have to use the exact drug that you want to market in phase 3. So, because the NIDA marijuana cannot be marketed, it cannot be used in phase 3 research. See, so that we have state medical marijuana that's legal all over the place, but we can't use that in FDA-approved studies because it wasn't grown under federal license. So even though the state legal marijuana is of higher quality, more consistent than the marijuana we're getting from NIDA, we can't use any of it. No, it's not the same problem with MDMA, and the reason is because there's quite a few licenses in the U.S., 20, 30, 40 licenses to chemical supply houses to manufacture synthetic chemicals. And similarly in Europe, it's just because of treaty obligations and sort of unique ways of the drug law growing that they have more control on the plant than they do on synthetic drugs.
So I'm going to invite the next question for Dr. Gamer.
And Liana, and yeah, Dr. Doblin, thank you so much. But I was focusing on what you were saying about this beautiful kind of primordial soup and the origins of humankind and how we have a new kind of scientific metaphor for how people and species need to cooperate in order to survive. So my question is, nothing changes culture like technological change brought on by scientific progress. So if we verify this and we're able to actually create the fucking origins of motherfucking life and a petri dish, which would be really cool, do we actually have to do much, or will it just kind of like osmosis into society over time? Besides letting people know that it's happening and that it's a thing, you know what I mean? Or will it just kind of like happen naturally on its own?
You know, it's actually happening right now, because everyone who sees this beautiful cycling sort of crystal and jelly-like model, they read something into it for them personally. And so that's why Ken Wilber writing and all that sort of stuff. So each person attaches by heart or by mind or by both to this powerful, beautiful new idea, the cycle that made us, and they interpret it for their own communities, right, and their own constituencies. So it's rolling already. You know, that article's helped, and the roadshow will help, but it's already rolling out, it's rippling out, and it's going to be a profound thing. I have no idea where it's going to go. We're presenting this at the SAND conference in October, Science and Non-Duality. So we have E = m squared, it's their logo. And the effort now is to roll this into consciousness research, because we found through various techniques at the Buddha of life 3 properties that cycle in a kind of triangle to boot the system up. And it scales up to something huge, which I'm calling the field. And it's where consciousness goes into, where primate consciousness draws from. And we think we found the secret, in a sense, that the living world is a machine to take improbable events and bring them toward probability and then make them actual. That's what the living world does that physics can't do. That's an even more powerful idea than the symbiotic start. Right, so we're bringing this to SANS, all these non-dual teachers and all this sort of stuff, so they will say, oh, that explains QP action at distance, the power of intention and all this stuff. We may have found a thing that does that. And then we can accelerate our use of that, because it's a boot up. These are boot up instructions that created created consciousness. So anyway, I'm digressing.
So I've actually got a question for Liana in regards to you were commenting on the plant, the cannabis plant actually wanting us to go and help it propagate and express itself further in society, which also you're a female entrepreneur as well, kind of carrying forth the torch of a feminine plant, et cetera, which then taps into the whole this natural progression, evolution, et cetera, and I'm wondering where and how do you see this expressing itself as the future goes further, as we deepen our awareness within these kind of larger systems and subsets of systems? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, sure. I think that any cannabis user can point to a few characteristics that are inherent within cannabis culture. And that's really what it's about. It's this plant draws forward something from us. It makes us more community-minded. It enriches and deepens our experience of life. It brings to us a form of peace and joy and connectivity. And it gives to us a connection with nature where we can really feel in tune with and tapped in with that. And so for me, what I see the opportunity is integrating all of the properties that the cannabis plant gives into us and breathes within us and makes us feel into all of our endeavors that we do with this plant. And if we are guided by the principles of the plant that it gives us, then it would follow that the industry that we build will be guided by the same ethical and moral code that is inherent within the plant. And so that's the opportunity that is really available to us right now, and it's our job to hold that torch and to do it as right as we can.
Yeah.
Next question. I'm also going to just open and invite any of the women in the crowd to have the floor as well if any of you have a question. So.
Hey, that was an attempt. Going towards the white guy.
Oh, a little bit of white guilt's a good thing.
So many things. One, I think that perhaps one that may unify all your experiences. There's been some recent evidence that the entorhinal cortex and the hippocampus interact to produce a third-person allocentric view of like a holographic map of our reality that we tap into to perceive things, and that is people have been putting electrodes in there and getting some like results that show that that's where we're recording it, and it has this radial symmetry kind of view of things that's seen from above. And wondering if you have any experiences that might lend to an interpretation of this. Like my personal guess from my experience with different entheogens as diverse as including ibogaine, is that we have what some might call the holy guardian angel, or the genius, or the voice of our conscience, this thing that we tap into. That do you think there's something there that we might all share?
Well, I'll respond not so much on a neurochemistry basis or brain science, but just to say that the essence of our therapeutic method, which is a non-directive method, what we're doing is encouraging the emergence of the unconscious as it arises to be the guide. The people that are sitting with the patient are not the guides. There's something that we are calling the inner healer.
Yes.
And so we know that our body has that wisdom. You know, you cut your body is going to heal itself. And we're assuming, positing, hypothesizing that there's a similar mechanism in the psyche, and it may be related to that kind of perspective that you're talking about. And so most psychotherapies are scripted in terms of like cognitive behavioral therapy, or the ways that you need to think about things, the exercises you need to do. And so in our psychedelic psychotherapy method, we have developed a manual of psychotherapy that's up on the MAPS website. And we've developed certain key criteria of how a therapist should act, which we call adherence criteria. We have trained graders that review the videotapes to give feedback. But it's all about trying to support the inner healer and the emergence in whatever order individual psyches manifest. So some PTSD patients will early on start talking about the trauma. Others will go to happy experiences in the way they're building straight to go to the trauma. But we don't have one right way. It's all about this inner healer that we support. And people inevitably get to the trauma. We don't have to remind them of that. But I think maybe there is that mechanism.
Keep it rolling. Keep it rolling. That's our 5-minute warning.
To address, Rick has addressed, in a sense, inner spirit, the powerful entity that is writing the candle in all of us. My work in the origin of life, I've reached out to the outer spirit. And the last trip to Peru, I presented what I call endo-tripping or endogenous tripping to Mother Gaia, the model. And I've been doing this for years, and I get peer review. And I get rotating things, and she shows me the next step. And in the last trip, and this was my final dance with her, because we finished our practice, I snuck it in the last minute. I said, Mom, look at the pool and the cycling things, and we saw all 3 phases and everything. And I would sit back like, okay, she's gonna knock me on the head with the frying pan, and sit down, I'll show you where you're missing. And instead, I was transported into the Haitian island, and in front of me was this boiling pool of gray water and all these droplets coming out in high speed. And she said, see how powerful life is when it gets control of its environment. See how powerful, because it has a planet to tame and a garden to grow for you. It has a lot of work to do. And then I turned to her, and she's like on the mountain, the last goodbye, and I said, have we found the ancestor? She says, you have found the ancestor.
So we've got time for one more quick question, maybe two, if we've got succinct questions and answers.
Okay. This question is for Liana and Rick. When you're listening to Bruce explain his new way of conceiving of evolution and the spiral, do you believe that people need to have a psychedelic experience in order to see that, in order to just have their mind open to this new kind of model?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I often say that psychedelics are not for everyone, and that you absolutely do not need to use psychedelics. It's my understanding that I feel that psychedelics were almost, and like LSD was almost divinated to us right now, because we're in such a crisis of spirit. And so it almost created a shortcut, but there's so many other modalities. There's Vipassana meditation, there's yoga practices, there's all these different, there's holotropic breathwork. There's all these different ways. I mean, when you're in an altered state, there's 7 neurochemicals that are firing in your brain in all altered states. And there's all these different ways to access altered states. And so no, I do not think you need psychedelics. I do think that we do need psychedelic medicine because we are in a crisis right now. So it is creating that avenue for us. But it's definitely not for everyone, and it should be treated and taken with great care.
I would say something very similar, which is that I would say yes, we need psychedelic experiences to be able to grasp those deeper understandings, but it doesn't have to be with drugs. That psychedelic means mind manifesting, and there are many ways to do that. And I think one of the problems of the 60s, the first sort of wave of psychedelics, was a certain kind of arrogance that those people that were taking psychedelics were like, this is the only way you can get this information. And those people that had taken the psychedelics were somehow or other wiser and more spiritual than everybody else. And not only that, we could sort of remove ourselves from the culture, become this counterculture, which created this division, created a lot of the repression that followed. So I think there does need to be a deeper understanding, but it's a terrible mistake to say it must be only with psychedelics. But it must be, I think, the psychedelic mind manifesting experience to help people move out of their egocentric views, out of the Copernican perspective, into the, or back into the prior limited paradigm shift. And I think we need that.
Yeah. Cool.
Real quick.
One second, just wait. Okay.
Very quickly, I've seen him speak a bunch. Maps has done quite a lot of work, and it's a very, very optimistic plan that we're seeing here. And we know that a cultural backlash that you just explained a little bit about why it happened sank these efforts in the past. What ways do you seek to mitigate that again?
I mentioned how on Sunday we had an article in the Washington Post front page, an article in Science. What we're working on now is an article in Breitbart.com about MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder. So you have to really understand where the culture is coming from. And right now, the culture has recognized that veterans with PTSD are a national scandal and that we have a national obligation to help them. And that's kind of a bipartisan perspective. So we've made a strategic alliance, and I would say that if you look at the 60s and the psychedelics were intimately linked with the anti-war movement. You know, the Beatles, All You Need Is Love, and the whole way in which many people were motivated by psychedelic experiences to go against the Vietnam War and to work in other areas for social justice, for women's rights, for civil rights. So now, though, 50 years later, we have an alliance with the military. And we're working together to try to bring psychedelics back into the culture because of the perceived enormous need in pain and suffering. So right now, just to give you a sense of it, there's about 1.4 million veterans receiving disability payments for mental health related disorders. And it costs the VA somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 billion every single year. So when Trump says he's going to increase the military budget by 10%, that's $54 billion. But more than half of that is going out every single year just for disability payments for mental health related disorders. So I think the other part of the backlash issue is that in the 60s, the backlash was about the intermingling of psychedelics and politics, and psychedelics and civil protest. Now, the main driver of the drug war, and you could say this from marijuana, is parents worried about their kids and the fears that are generated about what these drugs are going to do to our delicate children. And so, one of the reasons we started the Zendo Project is that a lot of young people come to places like Burning Man, and a lot of them have experiences that are not productive for them, or that are disorienting, not properly supported. So, if we can, in this context here and out in the larger world, help people manage their challenging psychedelic experiences that they're naturally gravitating to because the traditional rituals and rites of passage aren't powerful for them, and that's why we've created this whole Burning Man ritual. That we need to address the fears of parents, and that's where we're working a lot. But people are willing to go past their fears when they have something even greater that they need, or even greater that they're fearing. So the work with psilocybin has been a lot with end of life. People are more scared of dying than they are of drugs. So if we can bring in drugs as a way to facilitate the process of a more humane death. So I see what's happening with this current Trump and Sessions. It's kind of like a fever, a cultural fever. And in psychedelic psychotherapy terms, it's like things are, the unconscious is manifesting. And you need to process it, but it's part of the healing process. So it's good that it's coming out from the shadows and people can see what it is. And I'm very hopeful, but I think that is the key issue, is whether there will be a backlash and how do we avoid it. But right now, the fact that the FDA gave us breakthrough therapy in such a public way makes it that we're immunized if the police authorities want to stop us, which they cannot do. So I think we've got a good chance, but everybody has to be really responsible with their psychedelic research, your own personal psychedelic use, particularly with young people, and they're all moving out of here to trying to manage. The other part of it is the gay rights movement and coming out, the people coming out. So we need people who've had beneficial psychedelic experiences or experiences with marijuana not to keep it secret, to let other people know, and that's the key way, I think. And next August 19th is the 75th, next April 19th, 2018 is the 75th anniversary of the discovery of LSD. And so we're thinking of having a 1 or 2 day conference just focused just on LSD. And what we want to do is gather stories from people about their own LSD experiences. Maybe they had it 50 years ago, or maybe they had it 5 days ago, or yesterday. But if we can collect loads and loads of stories of this mass coming out, I think that will also help address and reduce the possibility of a backlash.
Real quick burning question. What do you think about blockchain-assisted anonymity for adding like biometrics to a database like Arrowhead?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes is the answer.
Yes.
Why do you feel it's important?
Oh man, I'm just so floored about blockchain technology in general and the ability to create a truly transparent system that is immutable, and the opportunity to do that and to integrate this amazing technology that, you know, blockchain and crypto was founded off of people who have anarchist mindsets and who are trying to do something different in the world. And I just think it's really powerful that, you know, we have the cannabis movement and now we have the crypto movement, which are creating huge economic opportunities for people like us to have go out there and have real impact in the world. It's really exciting. Yeah, I mean, we just were on a cruise, the Crypto, Psychonauts, and Cannabis Oh My Schmooze Cruise. It's like the most San Francisco event to ever happen. Like 2 weekends ago or something. Yeah, it was really good. But yeah, so the communities are integrating and are integrated already, and that is power right there. So yeah, and I just wanted to add one thing to what Rick was saying too, just about we've identified as being counterculture, and I want to invite us into identifying as being mainstream American culture. Because the values that are inherent in this community, in our society, are the America that I believe in and that I identify with. I don't identify with football and hot dogs and beer, right? And that's the American culture. Some other things too that we were raised on. And so I really believe that the true American culture was born in the 60s, and the more that we can go away from identifying with the counterculture and identify with being mainstream American culture, and I am supporting the mainstreaming of psychedelics, is going to really benefit our movement in the long run.
I want to very quickly give an example of how that's happening. So in 2005, I had this experience of suing the DEA and having them talk about my marijuana use as a way to delegitimize me. And we had some of the lawsuit was the week before Burning Man, and then some was several months after Burning Man, the testimony. And so when I was here at Burning Man, I had this image of the sacred space of Burning Man, in a sense being from the center camp to the man, and then from the man to the temple. So that's kind of, and then I thought, where is that map in America? So in a sense, the Washington Monument is this vertical structure, it's the man. And it is on the wall, the National Mall. And at the time, the temples were sort of more vertical structures, and that felt like Congress, the White, with the House and the Senate. And so that's on one end of the Washington Mall. And so I felt if we could map the sacred space of Burning Man on the sacred space of America as a way to symbolize our Burning Man selves coming to America, that would be a healing of that, bringing this from counterculture to culture. So it took 10 years for us to figure out how to do this, but 2 years ago, in November, was the first catharsis on the mall, and it was the burner community, Dr. Bronner's, psychedelics. We actually got a permit to set up a fire between the White House and the Washington Monument. It took us 10 years to figure out how to do that. It was the first open fire on the Washington Mall since World War II, as far as we could figure out. And you have to protest something. So we were protesting the need for more money for treatment of trauma. What was structure that was burned was a temple, a small temple, but people wrote inside it their pain from the drug war. And then when the temple burned, the outer layers fell apart, and then inside was a jail cell, and then the jail cell burned up. And we actually had another event last year, the weekend right after the election, and that was to heal the trauma of the election. And we took Braxis, the art car, the Dragon art car, came out to the Washington Mall, and we actually had a permit to do a parade from the Washington Mall after sunrise. So this involves all-night dancing, of course, to till sunrise with DJs playing incredible music. And then we had a parade from the Washington Monument to the Capitol with the Braxis parked in front of the Capitol with all sorts of people standing on it. And that was, for me, healing my fighting spirit to get back that we are Americans. We're not, suppressed. We're part of the mainstream. And then we're having another event. So I think it's the 10th and 11th or so of November this year. So any of you who want to come, it's one of the Burning Man regionals on the Washington Mall. And that's, I think, the fact that it even happened is this emergence from these isolated experimental centers back into the mainstream. And that's what we do.
And just for a frame of reference, the gentlemen from the Catharsis crew will be on the session immediately following this on civic activation. So please stick around. We're just going to kind of keep this day rolling. This is a lot of fun. Continue, Dr. Kramer.
Why don't we, in Burning Man 2018 or 19, maybe during the election year, or 2020, why don't we construct Washington here? So the man is in a structure, in a nice shade structure, because he knew it was going to be bloody hot this week. So what if that's the White House, right? The White House, and the man is standing in there, the enlightened, like, I'm president, or presidentess, or whatever, and it's your ideal president, is the man. And then the temple is, say, Congress. This is a great big dome and everything, and it's like the most chill, wonderful Congress we could ever envision, like Charles Eisenstein's books, right? And then all around are states, So each of the theme camps decides to be a state. So everyone feels represented, because at political conventions in the old days, and they're holding the Alabama sign and everything, people felt freaking included by holding their Alabama sign. What if every theme camp chooses a state, invite people from the state, Alabama, Alaska, whatever? We can create the future vision of America right here, folks, and then get it all covered like beautifully, and we have a political convention, right? So I proposed this to Larry Leslie because he was proposing all these ideas. We need a constitutional convention. So we have a constitutional convention right here, where we decide to form new parties, right? And then the people with the money, like people running out on the playa with briefcases, like the parties are formed, and there's like, hey, here's our money, here's our money. It's like, oh, don't want your money anymore, but like, here's a smoothie. Send them back so that the money people just go back, because they're not allowed in that party, in that convention. And then we say, we've just birthed a new America right here. And look at all these parties, all these crazy people, and all this creativity and ideas. And here's the renewables party, and here's the space colonization party, and then somehow we have an election. In the convention, we make the new parties, and we have an election, and we elect. We elect. So perhaps the theme of Burning Man 2020 during the roll election is we elect. The people, are going to elect. So, and this spreads out from here, and it connects with Rick's events in DC and stuff like that. And we just learned how to do this out here. And anyway, I'm babbling.
We got another question.
I got a question. So I'm glad you brought up the war on drugs, aka the Operation Incarcerate Brown People, aka the war on black and brown people, which is what this country was founded on. I have some concerns and some questions, and please give me some hope, because I'm a little hopeless right now. And not a hopeless romantic, just fucking hopeless. So what I'm hearing is, and what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of efforts to decriminalize and to make it accessible medicinally. What I'm not hearing is that it's going to be accessible because, like, for instance, I'm very afraid of losing my health care right now. Because of what's going on and what happened in the last election and what's going on currently. It's kind of a two-part question. The first question is, are there efforts to make sure that we have access to everybody? When my experience in Colorado is that the dispensaries were not in the poor neighborhoods. It was mostly next to a Lululemon or a Starbucks, it was pretty much the privileged white people that I saw going to dispensaries. The other part is that, so again, the war on drugs ended up with a lot of people that look like me and black and brown people getting incarcerated at, it's like 1 in 4 brown people have been incarcerated at some point in their life, have some kind of dealing with the legal system, as you know, which is a clusterfuck. My question is are there efforts to make it so that they can also cash in and also be a part of this? Because again, dispensaries not happening on the south side of Chicago. If we get them, it's probably going to be in the richer white neighborhoods.
You bring up a critically important issue that is a very, very hot debate and topic in the industry right now. And right now we have cities like Oakland who have created equity permitting. So we've created in Oakland special zones where people get to kind of cut the line in their application process if they've been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs and if they're living in a neighborhood that has a disproportionate amount of arrests for people. And now there's been things like the Hood Incubator was just established in Oakland. And this is the first ever business accelerator that was formed to help people in these neighborhoods, these disenfranchised neighborhoods that have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, transition their black market businesses into above ground legal businesses, because there's already thriving industry in these neighborhoods. And so it is just beginning, and it is just in the seed stage right now. We have the Minority Cannabis Business Association was formed about a year and a half ago. And so now we have those people coming, we have people coming together to bring this conversation to the national table and to bring it to all the big events that we go to and all the people who are involved in writing policy. And that's my other recommendation. I mean, this is an issue. We have a problem. There is not equal access. There's not equal availability to access. And so we need people to get up, speak up, and participate. And yet, if there's something going on in your locality, the way that regulations are being written, you have state level regulations, then you also have local regulations. Your municipality gets to decide how they distribute licenses. And so if there's an issue, if you're seeing some sort of injustice, if you want some access, get involved. Regulations are being written right now. Go sit and meet with your neighborhood council or your city council members and have meetings. They're receptive. They want to know. They want to have feedback. And then participate in the efforts. There's money being raised right now. We're going to need a lot of money for litigation for getting people out of prison right now that are serving time for cannabis crimes, for non-violent, drug offenses. So this is a big effort, it's a big topic, and the solution is forming, but it's definitely not here yet. So yeah.
I just want to add that in the world of our MDMA PTSD research, we've done some studies just with veterans, firefighters, and police officers. And there's a lot of minorities that enlist in the military as a way forward, more than others, because that's one of the more accessible economic opportunities. And so we just assumed automatically that we would have a lot of minorities volunteering to be in the MDMA study from the veteran community, but we didn't have a single one. And so it's been really surprising to us the legacy of the Tuskegee experiments where, blacks had syphilis and they were watched but not treated. So we've come to realize that there's an enormous mistrust in minority communities about participating in scientific research. And there's also the psychedelic community. Burning Man is mostly white. The psychedelic community is mostly white. So we have to make affirmative actions to try to get more balance in our patient populations. And so there's a woman who is an expert in racial trauma from racial prejudice. And she's at the University of Connecticut. And so we're actually having one site, and we've trained a bunch of African American therapists to try to reach out to African American PTSD patients. But it's not something that happened automatically. We thought it would, maybe naively, but we're having to do a lot of work there as well, and also to reach out to African Americans being willing to be trained as therapists, as well as volunteer for patients. So that's a challenge for us as well in the psychedelic community.
So that concludes this session. Let's give a really round of applause. Thank you very much. we're really moved. I'm really moved by the work that you all do, and I just wanted to say thank you for fighting the really fucking tough fights and struggles, because you know we're at a point where the recognition for medical and recreational purposes, et cetera, has come into an easier frame, and a lot of people went to jail, and people who pioneered this lost their credibility for unjustified reasons. So thank you for taking those risks, thanks for doing the hard work, and thanks for being courageous explorers of the mind, body, and spirit. So.
Yeah!